I never expected her to remember my name, let alone the way I took my coffee. It was just a corner cafe, half empty most mornings, the kind of place you sit because the music isn't too loud and the lights don't press down on you. I went there after class, always with a book I barely opened. The routine was safe, predictable. Until she started showing up. She wasn't hard to notice. Mid-40s, sharp posture even when she looked tired. She carried herself like she had been on a stage once, like her body knew how to hold silence and space at the same time. The first time she ordered, she stood close enough that I caught a faint perfume, not sweet, but clean, like something you'd wear when you didn't want to be remembered but always would be. She glanced at me once, then again. I thought maybe it was nothing. But then, one morning, she sat across the room, and when the barista asked for my order, she finished it before I could. Black. No sugar. She didn't even look up when she said it. I laughed, awkward, because what else do you do when a stranger knows your habit? She folded her napkin 3 times before setting it down beside her cup. The smallest things about her stuck with me, how her hand rested on the table with fingers spread, like she was measuring distance without meaning to. Weeks slipped into a rhythm. I'd walk in, she'd already be there. Sometimes we exchanged a few words, always short, never leaning too far. She asked once if I was still pretending to read the same book. I told her it made me look smarter. She smirked, and that smirk stayed with me longer than the coffee did. I never asked her what she did, but I noticed the way her feet shifted when she stood up, almost like she was keeping time to something no one else could hear. One day, I saw a flyer tacked to the cafe wall, local dance studio, evening classes. Her picture was there, younger, but unmistakable. A dancer. Suddenly, all the lines of her body made sense. I caught myself watching her too long after that. Not in the way you look at someone beautiful, but the way you look at something you don't want to forget. I'd flick my eyes away when she noticed, but she never called it out. Just this quiet allowance. At night, I'd half-type messages I never sent. To no one, really. Sometimes I imagined telling her about the things I couldn't tell my friends, that I stayed up too late, that I hated silence but craved it anyway. My phone screen would glow in the dark until I locked it again. One Thursday, the cafe was nearly empty. Rain streaked the windows. She slid into the seat across from me without asking, her cup in hand. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She tapped the rim of her mug twice, like marking a beat. "You've been watching," she said finally, eyes steady, voice lower than usual. Then, a pause so thin it could have broken under its own weight. "Now it's your turn." The words stayed there, heavy and unshaken, while the rain filled all the silence I couldn't. The next time I saw her, it wasn't at the cafe. I was walking back from class, the air sharp with late autumn, when I noticed her struggling with a grocery bag outside the duplex next to mine. I didn't even know she lived that close. She caught me looking, gave a short smile, and said, "You're not going to just stand there, are you?" I took the bag from her. It wasn't heavy, but she let me carry it anyway. Inside her place, everything was spare, lived in but not cluttered. A pair of old ballet shoes sat on the shelf above the coat rack. She saw me notice and said, "They don't fit anymore, but I can't throw them away." That was the first time she gave me a piece of herself without hiding it in a smirk. We sat at her small kitchen table, mugs of tea steaming between us. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was too aware. My eyes kept drifting to her hands, slender, restless, like they never learned how to be still. She noticed. Tapped her knuckles lightly against the mug and said, "You're quiet today." I wanted to tell her everything, the late nights, the ache that came from nowhere, the way she made the air feel charged even when nothing was happening. Instead, I shrugged. Just thinking. Dangerous habit, she said softly, as if she knew exactly what kind of thoughts I was having. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't check it right away, but the sound reminded me of something I kept ignoring. This wasn't simple. She was divorced. I'd overheard her mention it once in passing. And me, I was barely into my 20s, renting a single room, the ink on my student ID still smudged from use. There was no reason for our lives to overlap except that they already had. I imagined the headlines in my mind, the judgmental whispers, his neighbor, twice his age. I imagined my friends laughing, asking crude questions. And I imagined the silence afterward, how none of that would matter when it was just the two of us in this kitchen, steam rising between cups. She leaned back, crossed her arms. You think too much. I can see it on your face. I laughed, half to cover the way my chest tightened. Maybe. We sat a while longer, saying little. The clock ticked over us, steady and unbothered. At one point, she reached across the table, not for me, but for the sugar jar. Her fingers brushed mine in passing, light as a thought you almost forget. She didn't pull away quickly, and I didn't either. When she finally drew her hand back, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't pin down. Something between warning and invitation. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The cafe felt different after that night in her kitchen. I caught myself glancing at the door before she even arrived, rehearsing nothing in particular, just the way I might say hello. When she finally walked in, her hair damp from the rain, she looked straight at me, then at the empty chair across the table. I nodded. She sat. We didn't say much at first. The hum of the espresso machine filled in for us. Her sleeve brushed mine when she set her cup down, and I felt it too sharply. She noticed. Pulled her arm back just a fraction too fast. You're early today, she said. Class was cancelled. Her mouth moved like she might say more, then closed again. She stirred her coffee even though she drank it black. That was when one of my friends walked in and met, from class. He spotted me, started to wave, then stopped when he saw her. He gave me a look. Just a flick of his eyebrows, but enough to send heat crawling up my neck. I pretended not to notice. She did, though. Her eyes flicked between us, calm but sharp, as if she'd been waiting for that exact interruption. Friend of yours? She asked after Matt left with his order. Yeah. He didn't expect to see me here. With me, she said, not unkindly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands fidgeted with the folded napkin in front of me. We let the silence stretch. It wasn't the easy silence from before. It was tight, strung thin like a wire you don't want to touch. She finally broke it. This isn't simple. Her voice trailed, as if the rest of the sentence had dissolved before it reached me. I swallowed hard. I know. And maybe we both did. The gap between our ages. The fact that I was still figuring myself out while she already carried the weight of a life lived, partly unraveled. I should have looked away, but I didn't. She tapped her spoon against the cup once, twice. Then stopped. Her eyes lingered on mine longer than they ever had. I thought, no, I knew, if I leaned forward even an inch, she wouldn't move away. The door opened. A rush of air. Someone else came in, laughing too loud. The moment cracked like thin glass. She pushed her chair back slightly, not standing, just reminding both of us where we were. Anyway, she said, softer now, you should finish your coffee. I nodded, though I hadn't touched it. My pulse was still caught in that almost touch, that near confession neither of us dared to finish. When she finally stood to leave, her hand brushed my shoulder, just barely. A gesture small enough to mean nothing. But to me, it meant everything we hadn't said. It happened on a walk. Not planned, just a coincidence, at least, that's what I told myself. I was heading back from the store, headphones in but nothing playing. She was across the street, carrying a paper bag, the kind that looked too heavy for one hand. I crossed before thinking. "You again," she said, faint smile. Could say the same. We fell into step. The street was lined with bare trees, the kind that made the whole block feel emptier than it was. Our steps echoed. For a while, neither of us tried to fill the space. She shifted the bag to her other arm. "You don't have to keep rescuing me from groceries, you know." "I don't mind." "Maybe you should." The way she said it wasn't sharp. More like a warning wrapped in warmth. I wanted to ask why, but I already knew. Or thought I did. We reached a small park bench, the kind meant for dog walkers and smokers. She set the bag down, sat, rubbed her hands together against the cold. I sat too, careful to leave a gap between us. Her voice was quieter now. "You shouldn't spend so much time with me." The words hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened, and before I could stop myself, I asked, "Do you not want me to?" She looked at me then, really looked. A long, searching glance that made me feel seen and stripped bare all at once. "That's not the point." Silence again. I tapped my fingers against my thigh. She noticed. Finally, I said, "I think about you. More than I should." Her breath caught, just slightly. She turned her head away, toward the empty playground. "Don't say that." But she didn't move. She didn't stand. I could feel the air shift, thinner, heavier. "You already knew, didn't you?" Her lips pressed into a line. She didn't answer. The pause stretched, a shape all its own. Then, softer, almost broken, "You make me forget myself." It wasn't a confession, not exactly. But it cracked something open. The guilt in her tone. The longing behind it. And my own fear, that this would all vanish if I pushed too hard. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. "So what do we do?" The question hung between us. She didn't answer. Not yet. Her eyes flicked toward mine again, and for a heartbeat it felt inevitable, the pull across that small distance. My chest burned with the weight of almost. Then she exhaled, slow, deliberate, like pulling a curtain shut. "Careful," she whispered. And I couldn't tell if it was a warning or an invitation. The week after the park bench, everything shifted. I kept going to the cafe, same time as always. She didn't show. First day, I told myself she was busy. Second day, I stared at the door so long the barista asked if I was waiting for someone. By the third, I stopped bringing my book. On the fourth day, she walked in, later than usual, hair pinned back like she hadn't meant to come at all. She saw me, hesitated. Then, instead of sitting across from me, she ordered, paid, and left. No eye contact. Just gone. I sat there long after my coffee went cold, trying to untangle whether I'd done something wrong, or if she was protecting herself from what almost happened on that bench. That night, lying on my bed in the dim light, I typed her name into my phone. Nothing came up, of course. I didn't even know her last name. Just the shape of her hands on a mug, the way her voice caught when she told me not to say things out loud. I half wrote a note to her, just to see the words, "I miss you." Then deleted it. 2 days later, I saw her again, this time outside her building. She was helping a young woman carry a suitcase into the house. Her daughter, maybe. Or a niece. I didn't know. But the way she reached for the girl's shoulder, steady and protective, told me everything I hadn't considered. There was a life I wasn't part of. One she had no reason to let me near. She caught me watching from across the street. A flicker of recognition, then something else, an unreadable mask. She lifted her hand slightly, as if to wave, but dropped it before it became one. I didn't cross over. The next morning, I skipped the cafe. Stayed in. Tried to study, couldn't. Tried to sleep, couldn't. The rhythm we'd built, small glances, shared silences, was broken, and I had no idea if she meant to mend it. By the weekend, I walked past the cafe without going in. The window seat where she usually sat was empty. I stared too long, then kept moving. Back in my room, I pulled out my phone again. Opened a blank message. Typed, "Are you okay?" Stared at it until the screen dimmed. My thumb hovered over send, but I couldn't. I didn't even have her number, only an idea of it, written into the air between us. I locked the phone, dropped it beside me. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late evening when it finally happened. I wasn't planning on seeing her, I'd stopped planning altogether. But as I was coming home, I noticed the light in her kitchen window. Warm, steady. I stood at the bottom of the steps too long, torn between pretending not to notice and knocking anyway. Before I decided, the door opened. She stepped out, pulling a cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Her eyes widened a little at the sight of me, then softened, like she wasn't sure if I was real. "You've been avoiding me," I said. My voice came out smaller than I meant. She didn't answer right away. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "And you've been looking for me." The silence between us was heavier than the night air. I nodded. No point denying it. "I saw your daughter," I blurted. Then regretted it instantly. Her face shifted, surprise, then something like resignation. "She was just visiting." "Doesn't change anything." "Doesn't it?" She looked away, into the dark street. "You don't understand. This isn't about wanting or not wanting. It's about what happens if I forget myself. What people will see. What she will see." Her words should have been enough to stop me. Instead, I stepped closer, until I could see the lines at the corners of her eyes. "I don't care what people see." She laughed then, not cruelly, but tired. "That's because you're 20. You think not caring is a choice you can keep." The truth of it cut deep. But so did the thought of letting her slip away into silence again. My hands fidgeted at my sides, useless. Finally, I said, "Then tell me what you want. Just once. Even if you take it back tomorrow." Her eyes met mine, steady and unflinching. For a long time, she didn't move. I thought she might close the door. Then, barely audible, "I want not to feel so alone." Something inside me broke open at that. No rehearsed response, no clever line, just the raw honesty of it. I stepped closer again, enough that our arms almost brushed. "I can't fix your life," I said quietly. "But I can sit with you in it." Her eyes glistened, though she blinked it away quickly. She let out a shaky breath, then reached out, just her fingertips on my wrist. Not a grab, not a pull. Just contact, grounding and fragile all at once. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The night hummed around us, distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere. Ordinary sounds that made this feel even more exposed. Finally, she whispered, "Okay." That was all. No promises. No declarations. Just that single word, carrying the weight of everything we hadn't dared to say. Winter softened into spring before I realized how much had changed. We didn't talk about what we were, or how it looked from the outside. We didn't need to. It was in the small things, the extra mug waiting on her counter, the steady presence of her footsteps above mine at night, the way she knocked once on my door before letting herself in with a plate of food. We kept our routines, but they bent toward each other. I still went to the cafe most mornings, still ordered black coffee. Sometimes she joined me. Sometimes she didn't. But even when she wasn't there, the chair across from me didn't feel empty anymore. It just felt like hers. On Sundays, we walked. Not far, just around the block, past the same bare trees, past the bench where everything had nearly spilled out once. Sometimes we sat there, side by side, not saying much. One time, she nudged me with her shoulder and said, "Still thinking too much?" I answered with a laugh that carried farther than I expected. There were moments when doubt crept back in, when I wondered how her daughter would see me, or what my friends might whisper. But the weight of those questions grew lighter, week by week, replaced by something quieter, steadier. Not certainty, but choice. One evening, I helped her carry groceries again. She made tea while I put things away, moving around her kitchen like it had slowly become mine too. She handed me the mug and sat across from me, just like that first time. Only now the silence wasn't sharp, it was warm, worn in. She tapped her knuckles against her cup, a habit she never broke. I caught her hand before she pulled it back this time. She didn't flinch. Just let it rest there, eyes steady on mine. "I used to think I couldn't have this," she said quietly. "That it wasn't allowed." "And now?" I asked. She smiled, small but real. "Now I just drink my tea and let you carry the bags." We both laughed. It wasn't loud, but it filled the room in a way silence never could. Later, when she walked me to the door, the clock in her hallway read 8:47. The same time it always seemed to be when we crossed thresholds together. I don't know why it mattered, but it did. Some details stick, like anchors. At the door, she brushed her hand against mine, no hesitation this time. Just the kind of touch that meant we'd both stopped running. Looking back, I don't think it was one moment that bound us. Not the cafe, not the bench, not even that almost confession under the streetlights. It was all the pauses strung together. The unsent texts. The tea left half-finished. The way life, in all its ordinary weight, felt lighter when it was shared. And that's what stayed. Not a perfect ending. Just ours. 1.